Ambassador Park Mi-young walked through the long hallway of the Galactic Council building. Her shoes made soft clicking sounds on the smooth floor. The walls were covered with paintings and symbols from 12 different alien worlds. She had seen these decorations many times before, but today they felt different. Today felt important. The council chamber was huge. It could hold thousands of beings from different planets. 12 giant seats sat in a circle, each one made for a different alien species. Some seats were tall and thin for the bird-like Zephyrians. Others were wide and low for the rock-like granite people. In the center was a smaller seat for Earth's representative. Park Mi-young's seat. She sat down and looked around the chamber. The other ambassadors were already there. They talked quietly among themselves, but none of them looked at her. This was normal. Earth was considered a small and weak world by most of the galaxy. Chairman Zerion called the meeting to order. He was a Zephyrian, tall and covered in blue feathers. His voice was high and sharp, like a bird's call. "Today we discuss the matter of territory in the Outer Rim," he said. "The Vorthak Empire has brought an important request to our attention." Ambassador Thrax of the Vorthak Empire stood up. He was massive, with gray skin like stone and 4 arms. His species was known for being strong and aggressive. "The Vorthak Empire needs more space for our growing population," he said in a deep, rumbling voice. "We request the Council give us the human colonies in sectors 7 through 18. Park Mi-young felt her heart skip a beat. Those sectors contained 12 human colonies. More than 2 billion people lived there. She raised her hand to speak. "Ambassador Park may speak," Chairman Zerion said, but his tone suggested he was just being polite. Park Mi-young stood up. She was much smaller than most of the other ambassadors, but she kept her voice steady. "Those colonies have been human homes for over 100 years. More than 2 billion of my people live there. We cannot simply give them away." Ambassador Thrax laughed. It sounded like rocks grinding together. "Human colonies are poorly defended. Your people use old weapons and slow ships. The Vorthak Empire will put these worlds to better use." "The human representative makes a valid point about the people living there," said Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrians. Her feathers were silver and gold. "However, we must consider what is best for galactic stability. The Vorthak Empire is much stronger than Earth. It would be better if they controlled those worlds." Park Mi-young could not believe what she was hearing. "You are talking about moving billions of people from their homes. These are not empty worlds." "They are our homes." Chairman Zerion raised one thin hand. "Ambassador Park, your species joined the Galactic Council 300 years ago. At that time, humans fought with simple projectile weapons and chemical rockets. Even with the technology we have shared with you, how much could your people have really advanced? The Vorthak Empire has ships that could defeat your entire fleet." Other ambassadors nodded in agreement. The granite ambassador made a sound like grinding stone, which was how his people showed approval. The aquatic representative's water tank bubbled in what Park Mi-young knew was laughter. "Your people are traders and scientists," said Ambassador Keth of the Insectoid Collective. His voice buzzed like a swarm of bees. "You are not warriors. The Vorthak are warriors. It makes sense for them to control those strategic worlds." Park Mi-young felt anger rising in her chest, but she kept her voice calm. "My people have the right to defend their homes. We will not simply abandon our colonies because you think we are weak. Rights?" Ambassador Thrax stepped closer to Park Mi-young's seat. Even from across the chamber, his size was intimidating. "Rights are for those who have the power to defend them. Your species joined our council as junior members. You remain junior members." Chairman Zerion spread his wings slightly, a sign he was ready to end the discussion. "The matter is clear. Earth lacks the military strength to properly defend those worlds. The Vorthak Empire can provide better security for the Outer Rim. We vote now." The vote was quick and brutal. 10 species voted in favor of giving the human colonies to the Vorthak Empire. Only Earth voted against. The neutral observers, a peaceful species that rarely took sides, did not vote at all. "The motion passes," Chairman Zerion announced. "Earth has 30 standard days to evacuate all civilians from the 12 colonies in question. The Vorthak Empire will take control after that time." Park Mi-young stood up again. "This is not justice. This is theft. You are stealing our homes because you think we cannot defend them." "We are making a practical decision," Chairman Zerion replied, his feathers ruffled with annoyance. "Your species has always been emotional. This is why you remain a junior member of the council. You think with your hearts instead of your minds. When you first came to us," Ambassador Veltar added, You were fighting wars with primitive weapons. You used gunpowder and metal bullets. Your ships moved by burning chemicals. We welcomed you because we believed you could learn to be civilized. But a species that was so primitive 3 centuries ago cannot have become truly advanced in such a short time. Ambassador Thrax crossed his forearms. The Vorthak have conquered 47 star systems. We know how to fight. We know how to win. Humans know how to grow food and make art. These are not the same things. Park Mi-young looked around the chamber one more time. She saw the same thing she always saw. Alien beings who looked at humans like children playing at being adults. They remembered Earth as the newcomer species that had barely invented spaceflight when first contact was made. They had decided that humans could never be more than what they were 300 years ago. You have made your decision, Park Mi-young said quietly, but you have also made a mistake. You think you know what humans are capable of. You think you understand us because you remember us from long ago. But people change. People grow. People learn. Pretty words, Ambassador Thrax rumbled, but words do not stop warships. Park Mi-young picked up her datapad and walked toward the exit. As she reached the door, she turned back to face the council. You are right about one thing. Words do not stop warships. But you have forgotten something important about humans. We do not give up. We do not surrender. And we never stop preparing for the day we might need to fight again. The chamber was quiet as she left. Park Mi-young could feel the eyes of 12 species watching her go. They saw a small human woman walking away in defeat. They saw the representative of a weak species that had just lost 12 worlds without firing a single shot. They saw exactly what she wanted them to see. As Park Mi-young walked back down the long hallway, she activated a small communication device hidden in her jacket. The message she sent was brief and coded, but its meaning was clear to those who received it on Earth. The Council has forgotten what we are capable of, she whispered into the device. It is time to remind them. 300 years ago, humans had joined the Galactic Council as a primitive species, with simple weapons and basic technology. The Council members were right about that. But they had forgotten something important about humans. They forgot that humans never stopped learning. They forgot that humans never stopped improving. Most importantly, they forgot that humans never stopped preparing for the day they might need to defend themselves again. The 30-day countdown had begun, but Park Mi-young smiled as she walked to her ship. The Council thought they were giving Earth 30 days to surrender. They had no idea they were giving Earth 30 days to prepare for war. Admiral Kim Tae-ho received the coded message from Ambassador Park Mi-young while he was standing in his office on Luna Base. The message was short, but he understood what it meant. He had been waiting for this day for many years. He pressed a button on his desk that would change everything. Deep beneath the surface of Luna, alarms began to ring. Not the kind of alarms that meant danger, but the kind that meant it was time to wake up. For 200 years, humans had been building something in secret. Today, that secret would finally be revealed. General Cho Hyun-woo was already waiting in the secure briefing room when Admiral Kim arrived. So were dozens of other officers that most people had never heard of. These were the people who had spent their entire careers working on projects that officially did not exist. How long do we have? General Cho asked as soon as Admiral Kim walked in. 30 days until the Vorthak arrive at our colonies, Admiral Kim replied. But that is not when this will end. This is when it begins. Dr. Yoon Sora activated a holographic display in the center of the room. What appeared in the light made even the experienced military officers gasp. It was a star map, but not like any they had seen before. It showed the locations of human bases and shipyards that were supposed to be impossible. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Yoon said with a smile, welcome to the Shadow Fleet project. The hologram showed asteroid bases hidden throughout human space. Each base was carefully camouflaged to look like natural rock formations. Some were built inside actual asteroids that had been hollowed out. Others were hidden behind the moons of gas giant planets. The Galactic Council had no idea any of these bases existed. Engineer Baek Ji-hoon stood up next. He was young for such an important position, but he had been designing warships since he was a teenager. We currently have 847 combat vessels ready for action, he announced. These are not the ships the Council has seen. These are not the ships anyone has seen. The hologram changed to show a sleek, dark ship that looked nothing like the boxy human vessels the galaxy was used to seeing. This ship was smooth and curved, almost organic looking. It was beautiful in a dangerous way. The Council thinks human ships are slow and clumsy because that is what we wanted them to think, Baek Ji-hoon continued. Every ship they have seen from us was designed to look weak and outdated. Meanwhile, we have been building ships that use technology they cannot imagine. Captain Shin Yeon-soo had been quietly watching from the back of the room. She was one of the test pilots who had been flying these secret ships for years. "Sir, permission to speak?" "Granted," Admiral Kim said. "I have flown against simulated Vorthak fleets dozens of times," Captain Shin said. "Their ships are strong, but they fight like they think. Everything is organized and planned. They do not know how to handle chaos." Dr. Han Kyung-min activated another part of the hologram. "This is our real advantage," he said. "Not just better ships, but better thinking. The Council species all fight in predictable ways. They have rigid hierarchies and follow strict protocols. Humans fight differently." The hologram now showed battle simulations. Human ships moved in patterns that seemed random and chaotic, but were actually carefully coordinated. They split apart and came together in ways that confused enemy targeting systems. They used the environment around them as weapons, turning asteroids and space debris into projectiles. "The aliens have been sharing technology with each other for thousands of years," Dr. Han explained. "They all know each other's tactics. They all expect certain types of behavior in battle. But they have never fought humans who were serious about winning." General Cho pulled up another display. "Our advantages are not just technological. We have spent 2 centuries studying every species in the Council. We know their psychology, their weaknesses, their fears. The Vorthak are brave when they think they are winning, but they panic when things go wrong. The Zephyrians are excellent at coordinated attacks, but terrible at improvising when their plans fail." Admiral Kim looked around the room at the faces of the people who had dedicated their lives to this moment. "The Council thinks we are the same species that joined them 300 years ago. They think we still fight with primitive weapons and simple tactics. They are about to learn how wrong they are." Captain Shin Yeon-soo raised her hand again. "What about the colonies, sir? The people living there?" "The colonies will not be evacuated," Admiral Kim said firmly. "Instead, they will be defended. Every single one of them." The room was quiet for a moment as everyone understood what this meant. They were not just going to resist the Vorthak demand. They were going to fight back. Engineer Baek Ji-hoon brought up technical specifications for the new ships. "Each vessel can reconfigure itself during battle," he explained. "A single ship can split into multiple fighters or combine with other ships to form larger vessels. The modular design means we can adapt to any situation in real time." Dr. Yoon So-ra added more details. "We have also developed quantum communication networks that cannot be jammed or intercepted. Our ships can coordinate across vast distances instantly. We can share targeting data and tactical information faster than any other species in the galaxy." "What about our pilots and crews?" asked Colonel Park Sung-min, who commanded the Human Space Marine Forces. "They have been training for this their entire careers," General Cho replied. "Every human who has served in our space forces for the past 50 years has been prepared for this kind of conflict. They may not have known it, but every exercise, every drill, every training mission has been designed to prepare them to fight aliens who underestimate us." Admiral Kim walked to the center of the room. "The Council made a critical error today. They assumed that because we have been peaceful for 3 centuries, we had forgotten how to fight. They assumed that because we focused on trade and science, we had given up on military development. They were wrong on both counts." The hologram changed one final time to show a fleet of human ships unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They were fast, deadly, and numerous. More importantly, they were crewed by humans who had something the aliens did not understand: the refusal to accept defeat. "Dr. Han, how long until all ships are ready for combat?" Admiral Kim asked. 18 hours, sir. We have been keeping them in standby mode for years, waiting for this moment." Captain Shin, how long to coordinate with all colony defense forces? 6 hours, sir. The colony commanders have been briefed on the contingency plans. General Cho, how long until we can begin offensive operations? We can begin immediately if needed, sir. But I recommend we wait until the Vorthak actually attack one of our colonies. Let them make the first move so the galaxy knows they started this war. Admiral Kim nodded. Agreed, we will not fire the first shot. But we will most certainly fire the last one. The meeting continued for several more hours as they went over detailed battle plans, supply lines, and communication protocols. Every aspect of the coming conflict had been planned and prepared for decades. The humans had learned from every war in their history and combined those lessons with advanced technology and knowledge of their enemies. As the officers began to leave to prepare their commands, Admiral Kim called out one final instruction. Remember, the goal is not just to win this war. The goal is to make sure the galaxy never again thinks humans are weak enough to be pushed around. Captain Shin Yeon-soo was the last to leave. As she reached the door, she turned back to Admiral Kim. "Sir, what message should we send to the colonies?" Admiral Kim smiled. It was not a pleasant smile, but it was confident. "Tell them to hold their ground. Tell them help is coming. And tell them that in 30 days the galaxy is going to remember why humans were feared when we first reached the stars." As Captain Shin left to deliver the message, Admiral Kim looked out the window of his office at the Earth below. 300 years ago, his ancestors had built the first crewed spaceships and reached for the stars with primitive technology and iron determination. The Galactic Council had seen that determination as quaint and outdated. They were about to learn that human determination had not weakened over the centuries. It had only grown stronger and more focused. The Shadow Fleet was ready. The colonies would not fall, and the galaxy was about to see what humans could accomplish when they stopped pretending to be weak. The Vorthak War fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the new Busan system, exactly 30 days after the Council's ultimatum. Admiral Thrax stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crusher of Worlds, and looked at the tactical display with satisfaction. 200 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy had come to claim what was rightfully Vorthak territory. "Scan the system," Thrax ordered his weapons officer. "I want to know where the human evacuation ships are so we can escort them out safely." The scan results appeared on the main screen, and Thrax felt confusion for the first time in many years. There were no evacuation ships. Instead, there were 12 human vessels arranged in a defensive formation around the colony world. "Only 12 ships?" laughed Commander Vex, Thrax's second-in-command. "The humans must be making a symbolic gesture before they surrender." But Thrax was not laughing. Something felt wrong. In 40 years of military service, he had learned to trust his instincts. These human ships were not positioned like vessels preparing to surrender. They were positioned like vessels preparing to fight. Captain Lim Jae-sung stood on the bridge of his ship, the Soul's Pride, and watched the massive Vorthak fleet approach. His ship was one of the new designs that the galaxy had never seen before. From the outside, it looked like a sleek medium-sized cruiser. The Vorthak had no idea what it was really capable of. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the Vorthak flagship," reported Communications Officer Lee Da-young. "Put it on screen," Captain Lim replied. Admiral Thrax's massive form appeared on the display. His gray skin and forearms made him look like a living mountain. When he spoke, his voice was deep and threatening. "Human vessels, you are in violation of Galactic Council orders. This system now belongs to the Vorthak Empire. You have one chance to surrender before we demonstrate why 47 star systems bow to Vorthak power." Captain Lim looked at his crew. They were young but well-trained. Most importantly, they were humans who refused to back down from a fight. "Open a channel to the Vorthak fleet," he ordered. When the channel opened, Captain Lim's voice was calm and clear. "Admiral Thrax, this is Captain Lim Jae-sung of the Earth Defense Fleet. New Busan is a human colony with 200 million citizens who have lived here for over a century. We will not abandon our home because you want to take it." Thrax's laugh rumbled across the communication channel. "Captain, I have 200 warships. You have 12. Simple mathematics should tell you how this will end." "Mathematics is interesting," Captain Lim replied, "but there are other factors to consider." Lieutenant Commander Oh Yunbi, the tactical officer, was already analyzing the Vorthak formation. She had spent years studying alien military doctrine, and the Vorthak were exactly as predictable as the simulations had suggested. They arranged their ships in a classic overwhelming force formation, designed to intimidate enemies into surrender. "Sir, they are moving into standard Vorthak attack pattern 7, she reported. "Heavy ships in the center, support vessels on the flanks exactly as expected." Captain Lim nodded. "Are all ships ready for pattern echo?" "All ships report ready, sir," confirmed Lieutenant Kim Woo-jin from the communications station. "Admiral Thrax," Captain Lim said over the open channel, "you are correct that mathematics is important. You have 200 ships, but you made one critical error in your calculations." "What error?" Thrax demanded. You assume that our 12 ships are actually 12 ships. Captain Lim gave the signal and the impossible happened. Each of the 12 human vessels suddenly split apart like flowers blooming in space. What had appeared to be 12 medium-sized ships were actually 12 sets of modular components that could separate and recombine as needed. In seconds, the Vorthak found themselves facing not 12 ships but 144 smaller, faster vessels that moved in patterns no alien military doctrine had ever prepared them for. "What sorcery is this?" Thrax shouted, but his question was answered by the first wave of human attacks. Captain Moon-Da-Un led the fighter squadrons that had emerged from the modular ships. Her pilots flew in attack patterns that made no logical sense to alien minds, but proved devastatingly effective against enemies who expected predictable tactics. Instead of attacking in neat formations, the human fighters swarmed like angry insects. They used the asteroid field at the edge of the system as cover, darting between rocks and using them as shields. More impressively, they began hurling asteroids at the Vorthak ships using gravity slings and magnetic accelerators. "They are using space debris as weapons," Commander Vex reported in shock. "This violates 17 different articles of the Galactic War Conventions." "Since when do primitives know about unconventional warfare?" Thrax demanded. Lieutenant Commander Oyunbi had an answer for that, though the Vorthak could not hear it. "Since always," she said quietly to her crew. "Humans have been fighting unconventional wars for thousands of years. We just never told you about it." The human attack was unlike anything the Vorthak had ever experienced. Their ships were designed to fight in organized formations against other organized formations. But the humans refused to fight by those rules. Some human ships would combine in the middle of battle to form larger vessels with more firepower. Others would split apart to become multiple targets that were impossible to track. They used psychological warfare, broadcasting human war songs and battle cries that confused and demoralized the highly structured Vorthak forces. The worst part for the Vorthak was that nothing the humans did made sense according to proper military doctrine. They would retreat when they should attack when they should retreat, and sometimes do both at the same time with different parts of their fleet. Colonel Park Sung-min led the boarding parties that somehow managed to get onto Vorthak ships despite the ongoing battle. His Space Marines used tactics that the aliens had never seen before, fighting in 3 dimensions and using zero gravity as an advantage instead of an obstacle. "How are they getting onto our ships?" Thrax demanded as reports came in of human soldiers appearing inside Vorthak vessels. "Unknown, sir," Commander Vex replied. "They seem to be using some kind of stealth technology, but our sensors show nothing." What the Vorthak did not understand was that the humans were not using advanced stealth technology. They were using something much simpler and much more effective. Tactics that were so unpredictable that even advanced sensors could not anticipate them. Captain Lim watched the battle unfold from his command chair. The Vorthak were powerful and well-armed, but they were fighting the way they always fought. Humans, on the other hand, were fighting the way humans had always fought, by adapting, improvising, and refusing to follow anyone else's rules. "Sir, the Vorthak are attempting to retreat to long-range formation," reported Lieutenant Commander Oh Yunbi. "Let them," Captain Lim replied. "They want distance because they think their big guns will give them an advantage. Show them why they are wrong." The human ships that had been fighting at close range suddenly recombined into larger vessels with longer-range weapons. But instead of engaging in a traditional long-range duel, they did something the Vorthak had not expected. They disappeared. Where did they go? Thrax screamed as his sensors lost track of the human fleet. The answer came in the form of attacks from every direction at once. The human ships had not disappeared. They had spread out and were attacking from above, below, and all sides simultaneously. The Vorthak formation, designed to concentrate firepower in one direction, was helpless against attacks coming from everywhere. "Shields failing on multiple ships," Commander Vex reported. "We have lost 63 vessels and the humans have lost..." None, it was true. The human ships were too fast, too unpredictable, and too well coordinated to pin down. They fought like a living thing rather than a military force, flowing around Vorthak attacks and striking at weak points with surgical precision. After 3 hours of battle, Admiral Thrax made a decision that he had never made before in his military career. "All ships retreat to hyperspace. We withdraw from this system." As the surviving Vorthak ships fled, Captain Lim opened a communication channel to the colony below. "New Busan, this is Captain Lim. The Vorthak have been repelled. Your home is safe. The cheers from the colony could be heard across the communication channel. 200 million people were celebrating, but Captain Lim knew this was only the beginning. Before the Vorthak fleet jumped to hyperspace, Admiral Thrak sent an emergency message to the Galactic Council. His voice was shaken and confused as he made his report. Council members, we have suffered a major defeat at New Busan. The humans. They do not fight like any species we have encountered. They use tactics that make no sense, weapons that should not work, and strategies that violate every principle of civilized warfare. These are not the same primitives who joined the Council 3 centuries ago. They have become something else entirely. The message ended, and the Vorthak fleet disappeared into hyperspace, leaving behind 63 destroyed warships and a very important lesson. Humans had not forgotten how to fight. They had simply been waiting for someone to remind them why they needed to. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike any in their recorded history. Admiral Thrax's report of defeat at New Busan had reached every member species within hours. The chamber that had been so confident just weeks before now buzzed with nervous energy and disbelief. Chairman Zarion stood before the assembled representatives, his blue feathers ruffled with agitation. Admiral Thrax's report is concerning. However, we must consider that the Vorthak may have been unprepared for human desperation. Desperate creatures can fight with unexpected ferocity. Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrians nodded in agreement. One victory does not make the humans a military power. It simply means they got lucky against an overconfident Vorthak force. But Ambassador Keth of the Insectoid Collective was not so sure. His buzzing voice carried a note of worry. The report describes tactics and technologies that should not exist. Human ships that split apart and recombine, weapons that use asteroids as projectiles. This sounds like more than luck. In the empty seat where Ambassador Park Mi-young usually sat, there was only silence. She had not returned to the council since the ultimatum was delivered. Her absence seemed to speak louder than any words could have. Admiral Veltar of the Zephyrian fleet received his orders 3 days later. He was to lead a combined force of 5 species to restore order in human space and ensure that the colonies were properly transferred to Vorthak control. The council called it a peacekeeping mission. The fleet that assembled at Kepler Station was impressive by any measure. 500 ships from 5 different species, each with their own specializations and advantages. The Zephyrians brought speed and coordination. The Granite people provided heavy armor and massive firepower. The aquatic forces specialized in electronic warfare. The insectoids had swarm tactics in superior numbers. The energy beings could phase through solid matter and strike without warning. Admiral Veltar stood in his command center and felt confident for the first time since hearing about the Vorthak defeat. No single species could stand against this combined force, he told his staff. The humans may have surprised the Vorthak, but they cannot surprise all of us at once. But Fleet Admiral Kang Min-ho of the Human Defense Forces had been watching the Council's preparations through spy networks that the aliens did not know existed. He stood in the war room aboard his flagship, the Incheon, and studied the intelligence reports with his senior staff. They are making the same mistake the Vorthak made, he said to Captain Song Hyejin, his fleet commander. They think they understand what they are facing. Sir, 500 ships is still 500 ships, Captain Song replied. Even with our advantages, those are challenging odds. Fleet Admiral Kang smiled. Captain, you are thinking like an alien. You are assuming we will wait for them to come to us and fight the battle they want to fight. The plan that Fleet Admiral Kang had developed was audacious even by human standards. Instead of waiting for the Council fleet to reach human space, the Human Defense Forces would strike first at Kepler Station, while the enemy ships were still gathering and organizing. Captain Song Hyejin led the advance force of 150 human ships toward Kepler Station. The ships moved through hyperspace in complete radio silence, their quantum communication networks allowing coordination without any signals that could be detected by enemy sensors. Major Ryu Junki prepared his special operations teams for what would be the most challenging mission in human military history. They would need to infiltrate and disable key enemy ships from within, while the main fleet engaged in open battle. Commander Lee, Yujin ran final checks on the electronic warfare systems that would turn the aliens' own coordination against them. The Council species had been working together for thousands of years, and relied heavily on integrated communication networks. They had no idea that humans had learned to hack those networks decades ago. When the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at Kepler Station, Admiral Veltar was in the middle of a coordination meeting with the other species commanders. The first indication of trouble was when his aide burst into the meeting room with a report that should have been impossible. "Sir, human ships are attacking the station. 150 vessels." Admiral Veltar rushed to his command center, his silver and gold feathers standing on end. "How did they get here without being detected?" "Our sensor networks cover every approach to this system." The answer became clear as the battle began. The human ships were not fighting like any military force the aliens had ever encountered. They had approached through routes that should have been impossible, using gravity wells and stellar phenomena to mask their approach. More importantly, they were not fighting to win a traditional battle. They were fighting to cause maximum chaos and confusion among forces that depended on careful coordination. Commander Li Yujin's electronic warfare attacks began immediately. The communication networks that the 5 species used to coordinate their attacks suddenly became sources of misinformation and conflicting orders. Zephyrian ships received orders meant for granite vessels. Aquatic forces found their targeting data corrupted. Insectoid swarms broke apart as their hive mind connections were disrupted. "What is happening to our communications?" Admiral Veltar demanded. But his own officers could not answer, because their systems were also compromised. Captain Song Hee-jin led the main attack with tactics that broke every rule of civilized galactic warfare. Human ships would target enemy vessels and then ram them with kinetic projectiles launched from magnetic accelerators. They used the enemy's own ships as weapons, capturing disabled vessels and ramming them into other targets. But the most terrifying aspect of the human attack was Major Ryu Jun-ki's boarding operations. His team somehow managed to get aboard enemy ships despite active battles raging around them. Once inside, they did not try to capture the ships in traditional ways. Instead, they reprogrammed the ship's systems to turn against their own fleets. Granite-heavy cruisers suddenly opened fire on their own support vessels. Zephyrian fighters began attacking their carrier ships. Aquatic electronic warfare platforms started jamming their own fleet's communications. "They are inside our ships," screamed the Granite commander over the increasingly unreliable communication network. "How are they getting inside our ships during combat?" Admiral Veltar had no answer. Human boarding tactics made no sense according to any military doctrine he had studied. They seemed to appear inside ships as if they could walk through solid matter. But sensors showed no transporter signatures or phase technology. What the aliens could not understand was that the humans were using simple engineering knowledge and improvisation rather than advanced technology. They were accessing ships through maintenance ports, cargo bays, and docking tubes that were never meant to be used during combat. They were fighting in ways that military academies did not teach because they were considered impossible or impractical. The battle raged for 6 hours, but the outcome was decided in the first 30 minutes, when the Council fleet lost the ability to coordinate their attacks. Without coordination, 500 ships became 500 individual targets fighting separate battles against an enemy that could coordinate perfectly through quantum communication networks. Captain Song Hee-jin watched from her command chair as enemy ships began to retreat in disorder. "Sir, the Zephyrian fleet is withdrawing. The Granite forces are falling back to defensive positions. The aquatic ships are requesting permission to surrender." But Fleet Admiral Kang was not satisfied with just winning the battle. He wanted to send a message that would reach every corner of the galaxy. "Signal the remaining enemy forces. Tell them we accept their surrender, but they will remain here until they send a message to the Galactic Council." When Admiral Veltar was brought aboard the human flagship under a flag of truce, he expected to meet the commander of a primitive species that had gotten lucky twice. What he found instead was Fleet Admiral Kang Min-ho, a man who clearly understood war in ways that the galaxy had forgotten. "Admiral Veltar," Fleet Admiral Kang said as they met in the conference room, "you seem surprised by the outcome of this battle. Your tactics, they make no sense," Admiral Veltar replied, his silver feathers dulled with shock. "You fight without honor, without following proper military protocols." "We fight to win," Fleet Admiral Kang said simply. "Your military protocols assume that everyone will fight the same way. That assumption makes you predictable. Being predictable in warfare is usually fatal." Admiral Veltar looked out the window at the remains of what had been the most powerful fleet ever assembled by the Galactic Council. More than half the ships were destroyed or disabled. The rest were fleeing in disorder. How? He asked quietly. How did a species that fought with primitive weapons become capable of this? Fleet Admiral Kang stood and walked to the window. Admiral, your species and the others have been sharing military technology and tactics for thousands of years. You all know how each other fights. You all expect certain behaviors in battle, but you never fought humans who were serious about winning. What do you mean? For 3 centuries, we have been studying every species in the Council. We know your strengths, your weaknesses, your fears, and your blind spots. More importantly, the news of the Council fleet's defeat spread across the galaxy faster than hyperspace travel. Within days, every inhabited world knew that humanity had destroyed the most powerful military force in galactic history. The political shockwaves that followed changed everything. President Choi Won-sik stood before the emergency assembly of Earth's government and military leaders. The man who had spent his career managing peaceful trade agreements now found himself leading humanity in its first major war in centuries. The galaxy has changed, he announced to the packed chamber. 3 council species have requested defensive alliances with us. The Vorthak Empire is fragmenting as their subject worlds rebel, and the Galactic Council itself is in constitutional crisis for the first time in millennia. Admiral Kim Tae-ho, now promoted to Supreme Military Commander, added his own report. Sir, we are receiving diplomatic messages from 17 different species asking for protection or partnership. Apparently, word has spread that humans are willing to defend the weak against the strong. Ambassador Park Mi-young had returned from a tour of several alien worlds with news that would have been unthinkable just months before. The Council's authority is collapsing. Species that have been dominated by the larger powers for centuries are declaring independence. They see what we did and they want the same protection for themselves. But President Choi knew that winning battles was only the beginning. Now came the harder task of building a new order that would prevent this kind of crisis from happening again. The reformed Galactic Assembly met on the neutral world of Haven, a planet that had been chosen specifically because it belonged to no major power. The grand chamber that had once housed the Council's meetings was replaced by a circular hall where every species sat as equals. When President Choi entered the hall to address the assembly, he was greeted by a sight that would have been impossible under the old system. Representatives from dozens of species stood and applauded. These were not the major powers showing polite respect to a junior member. These were the voices of countless worlds showing genuine gratitude to the species that had proven the strong could not simply take whatever they wanted from the weak. Fellow beings of the galaxy, President Choi began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall's translation systems. We gathered today not as conquerors and conquered, but as equals seeking a better future for all our peoples. Chairman Zerion, still representing the Zephyrians but no longer holding ultimate authority, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The blue-feathered alien had spent his entire career in a system where his species was one of the dominant powers. The new reality was difficult to accept. The events of recent months have taught us all important lessons. President Choi continued. The greatest lesson is that power without wisdom leads to oppression, and oppression eventually leads to resistance. In the audience, Admiral Veltar listened with the focused attention of someone who had learned to respect human thinking the hard way. His silver and gold feathers were still dulled from the shock of defeat, but his eyes showed understanding. Humanity does not seek to rule the galaxy, President Choi declared. We have seen what happens when any single species has too much power over others. Instead, we propose a new system based on mutual defense and shared prosperity. The human doctrine, as it came to be called, was simple in concept but revolutionary in practice. No species would be allowed to demand territory from another simply because they were stronger. Military actions would require approval from a majority of assembly members. Most importantly, any species threatened with forced displacement would have the right to call for assistance from other assembly members. Ambassador Park Mi-young stood to present the technical details. We propose the creation of a galactic defense force composed of ships and personnel from all member species. This force will be commanded by rotating leadership and will exist solely to defend against aggression. The debate that followed was intense. The Vorthak representative, Admiral Crux, who had replaced the disgraced Thrax, argued that the strong had always ruled the weak and that trying to change this was unnatural. Your species believes in strength. Captain Lee Dong-soo replied from his position as military advisor to the human delegation. But you define strength as the ability to take what you want from those who cannot stop you. We define strength as the ability to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The granite representative worried that smaller species would abuse the protection system to avoid their responsibilities. The aquatic delegates questioned whether such a diverse force could function effectively, but it was Dr. Yoon Sora who provided the answer that convinced most of the assembly. Every species here has unique capabilities and perspectives. Humans excel at adaptation and improvisation. Zephyrians are masters of coordination and precision. Granite people provide unmatched defensive strength. When we combine these abilities instead of using them against each other, we become stronger than any single species could be alone. The vote to establish the new system was not unanimous, but it was decisive. 43 species voted in favor, with only 8 opposing and 3 abstaining. The old Galactic Council was dissolved, replaced by the Galactic Assembly, where every member had an equal voice. Fleet Admiral Kang Min-ho was chosen as the first Supreme Commander of the Galactic Defense Force, but the position would rotate between species every 5 years. His first act was to establish training programs where different species would learn to fight together using combined tactics. Captain Song Hee-jin found herself commanding a mixed fleet that included human ships alongside Zephyrian fighters, granite heavy cruisers, and vessels from a dozen other species. The integration was challenging at first, but the results were remarkable. The humans taught us that military doctrine should be a starting point, not a limitation, reported Commander Vex, the former Vorthak officer, who had volunteered to serve in the new force. When you combine human adaptability with Zephyrian precision and granite strength, you get capabilities that none of us could achieve alone. The changes went beyond military matters. Trade agreements were restructured to ensure that smaller species could compete fairly with larger ones. Scientific research became truly collaborative, with breakthroughs shared among all assembly members. Cultural exchange programs allowed different species to learn from each other in ways that had never been possible under the old hierarchical system. But perhaps the most important change was psychological. For the first time in galactic history, species no longer had to fear that their homes could be taken away simply because someone stronger wanted them. 1 year after the battles that changed everything, Captain Lee Dong-soo stood on the observation deck of the new assembly space station. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see ships from dozens of species working together on joint patrols and training exercises. A young Zephyrian pilot approached him. Her feathers were the bright gold of youth, and she wore the mixed insignia of the Galactic Defense Force. "Captain Lee, may I ask you something?" "Of course, Pilot Zara," he replied. "My instructor says that humans are the reason we all work together now instead of fighting each other. But I do not understand why your species was willing to fight such dangerous battles just to protect others." Captain Lee smiled as he watched. A mixed squadron of human and alien fighters, practicing coordinated maneuvers. "Because we learned something important during our long history, Pilot Zara. No one is truly safe until everyone is safe. When the strong can simply take what they want from the weak, eventually even the strong become targets for someone stronger. So you fought to protect yourselves? We fought to protect everyone, including our former enemies. Even the Vorthak are safer now because they know the rules apply to everyone equally." The young Zephyrian was quiet for a moment, processing this idea. The old stories say that humans were feared when they first reached the stars. But now you are respected instead of feared. How did that change happen? Captain Lee looked out at the peaceful scene before them, remembering the battles that had made it possible. Fear comes from not understanding someone's power. Respect comes from understanding how they choose to use it. The galaxy learned that humans fight not because we enjoy war, but because we refuse to let the innocent suffer when we have the power to help them. As Pilot Zara returned to her duties, Captain Lee remained at the window. The view reminded him of something Ambassador Park Mi-young had said during the final assembly session. The Council forgot that humans never stop growing, never stop learning, and never stop standing up for what is right. Today, the galaxy remembered. In the distance, he could see the colony world of New Busan, where the first battle had been fought. Children from dozens of species now played together in its parks and schools. The colony that had almost been given away was now a symbol of the new galactic order where no one's home could be taken by force. The galaxy had learned that humanity's greatest power was not their weapons or their tactics or their technology. It was their absolute refusal to accept that might makes right. And that refusal had changed everything. 300 years after joining the Galactic Council as a primitive species, humans had become the guardians of galactic civilization.